Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and I want to talk about Outriders in 2022. Now, Outriders came out, I want to say it was in 2021. I remember playing the demo during lockdown, and you know, it was fun. It was a fun game. But I've now finished playing Outriders, and I played through it with Don A's, and I've played through it with my brother, and we've just finished it, and I have some thoughts on the game, but let's just go over that. The game, if you don't know, the game is a looter shooter style game. You go through the game, you collect different types of armor, different types of weapons. They all have different stats or different abilities, and you can level them up. And as you go, you can make your guns better. They can have very specific effects, all that good stuff. The sort of thing you'd expect in a looter shooter. The game actually gets that element right. Like, you get a lot of loot, you get a lot of like cool things and cool customization you can do, which is really, really fun. So that's the idea of the game. It's like set on a different planet. It's basically humans trying to colonize another planet, dealing with aliens, you know, kind of stuff you've probably seen before, but like that's the setup of the game. Now, we finished the game and I felt very kind of done with it by the time we finished playing it. The actual game has a core good concept, but it feels like it hasn't necessarily been executed the best. And let's go over the good stuff, let's go over the bad stuff, and then I'll give my final thoughts on the game as a whole. So the good stuff about this game is the core combat, the core shooting, the core movement, and everything like that works really nicely. Like, this is very much like a Gears of War style game, and it's in the sense that you've got your knee-high walls or whatever, your head-high walls, and you can hide behind them, pop out of cover, you can blind fire. You can carry two main weapons and a sub-weapon. Sorry, two main weapons and a pistol, and the pistol can have its own effects and things as well, and the pistol's basically there in case you run out of ammo. They can be quite powerful, but they're never going to be as good as what your main weapons can be. Now, you have like sniper rifles, you have machine guns, you've got things like double guns, which are like two guns taped together. You've got different types of shotguns, because you get variants of things. So if you've got a sniper rifle single shot variant, you can have a bolt action variant, you can have an automatic variant. Same with shotguns, you've got the double guns, you've got the submachine guns. So it's basically, essentially, I used a light machine gun and a sniper rifle, but essentially it's mostly automatic weapons, sniper rifles and shotguns. That's basically what you've got, because you've got variants of like assault rifle, double gun, submachine gun as well. You don't really get anything different to that, I don't think, and it's because I primarily just used a light machine gun and a sniper. And then they have their variants, and they have their different pluses and minuses to them. Like, sniper rifles have long range damage the further away you are, like the higher it is generally speaking, versus like a submachine gun that has a lot of close range damage. And then there's LMGs that have like huge magazines. Assault rifles are kind of like middle of the road with their own stats. And so the actual combat of you moment to moment gameplay, where you're fighting enemies either in the open or hiding behind the walls and shooting them, is actually pretty good. There's a good variety of enemies, both humanoid and alien, so certain combat experiences can be different. So you'll be dealing with enemies that will rush you, you'll deal with snipers that, even if you're blind firing, can like snipe you, and you can see, you luckily they telegraph it because you have like the red dot on you. But there's actually a good variety of enemies in the sense of what they'll do. You get guys with flamethrowers, guys with mortars, guys with shotguns, all sorts of different stuff, guys with armor where you have to like blow the armor off their head so you can headshot them, all that good stuff. So the actual combat, pretty great, honestly. Like, that was fun. On top of that, you have skills that each class has. So skills and classes. There are 4 classes in the game. You have Technomancer, which is basically long range and has like, in each class can go in different directions, but it's basically long range class. You have a tank class, you have a sort of assassin class, and then you have like a fire mage class who just sets everything on fire, which is kind of cool. And the actual classes look pretty cool because they all act differently, and one of the big things in this game is that you heal by killing. So if you're the Technomancer, every time you shoot stuff you heal, because you're all about long distance. If you're the assassin, you get close range kills, you heal. If you're the tank, I think that's how it works as well. And then I think Pyromancer is you set things on fire and anything dies to fire. But on top of that, so each class has like a bunch of skills, and as you go up you can have 3 skills equipped any time, and then you can add on to those skills with weapon mods and armor mods. So for example, I technically went down a kind of like shrapnel based, I say shrapnel, like ballistic type weapons. So I had a grenade, I had a rocket launcher, like cannon, so you could put down this turret and it would just fire out rockets. And then I had ability that let me, if you tap it you get a rocket launcher, if you hold it you get a minigun, which is absolutely fun to use, if a little bit underpowered at times. But there are other abilities I could have, like a healing wave, or I could freeze people. And each class has a bunch of different ones, and and to be fair to them, they synergize really well. If you've got somebody who does extra damage versus ice, and you can freeze a bunch of enemies, suddenly that person's doing triple the damage they were before. Or, for example, I had the minigun that I could spawn, and when I spawned the minigun, it gave me like ridiculous amount of armor, like no knockback, nothing. So I could stand there and tank and let the other guys shoot stuff while the enemies are attacking me, because I'd be healing off of it so much faster than they can do damage. And so there's this really cool like interplay between those, and then each of those abilities that you have, when you unlock the mods for the weapons and the armor, you can like improve those significantly. So I had it so I got stupid amounts of armor with the minigun. I also got extra rockets when I used the rocket launcher, or it would interrupt people. Or like some of my guns would, like, when I score a crit, like explosions would appear. So there was really cool like synergy between playing the game with like all the classes and the skills and stuff. For example, Jack was playing the assassin type class and had this amazing slow field. So like run in, pop the slow field, and so that was good for me because I'm a sniper. So alright, okay, cool. I line up my criticals, bam, bam, bam. And we had an interesting makeup because both me and my brother were playing Technomancer's different builds, but we were doing silly amounts of crit damage and things like that. So it worked really, really well. So that part of it was fun. Like I said, the skills, good variety on them. The classes seem very different, which is fun. One of the things I've already mentioned, but one of the best things about this game is the modding system. I won't go over everything, but basically when you get a gun, you can add mods to it. You can then do... It's more like the crafting system, I should say, rather than the modding system, because the modding's part of it. But essentially, when you craft it, when you go into the crafting menu and you have a look at the gun, you can level up the gun, you can increase its rarity, you can change the mods, you can add extra points into it, because each gun comes with different secondary abilities. So it'll have like a firepower ability, which is like, it might have a firepower of 21k, and that might be like better in some aspects than your current gun, but overall it's better. And then it'll have like, you know, long range damage, and then it might have an increased fire rate, and then something else. So you always had these interesting combinations that you could then choose to level up. And this was all done by, when you have armor and weapons, you can break them, you can sell them for scrap, and scrap is your main currency, you get loads of it. Or you can break them down and turn them into leather or scrap, I think it was. I think that's how it worked. And essentially you could recycle these parts and then use them to like upgrade. And then you'd have, there was probably one too many currencies, because you had titanium as well, and then later on you had drop pod parts. So it got a bit silly, but generally speaking, it was pretty good when it came to like, you never really were going to get low on anything. And then you had shards for these different abilities, and you got a lot of shards, because every time you break down stuff you get shards. So all in all, like that system, like that whole system with the weapons and the customization of the weapons was amazing. Like really good, like really, really good system in play, very customizable, like one of the best parts of the game. And one of the other things that was really interesting, and an interesting way of doing things, was this world level system. So you have your personal leveling up. You level up, you gain extra health, you gain ability points, all that. But you also have a world leveling system, and it goes from 1 to 15. And as that goes up, it increases the difficulty of the enemies. It increases your drop loot chance. It increases all these different things. So you'll start finding legendaries in the world and all this other stuff. And it's a really fun system, and it lets you customize it, because if you get stuck on a part, you can like drop the level down a bit and get past it. Your loot's a bit worse, but it doesn't matter so much because you can put it back up. And it's something that I quite like the idea of more games doing. I think that itself was cool, because it just meant like you could automatically set it so it would just constantly go up. So the idea is it would scale with you. As you got better, the world would get harder, and you kind of never felt like you were behind the curve. So you can do it either way. You can make it harder for yourself, or you can make it easier for yourself. And that was implemented really well. I think that was one of the more positive things about this game. To be honest, those things I've just mentioned, the world system, the crafting, the core combat, and the skills and the classes, are really the only good bits about this game. It kind of falls apart everywhere else, unfortunately. Now, this first one's a bit of a personal preference, but I will say this is a big pet peeve of mine in many looter shooters, and Borderlands, being one of my favourites, still does this quite badly, and that's skill trees. And quite frankly, the skill trees that are in this game are awful. They are boring. For a game that is built around being co-op, there is no multiplayer component to this. There are these big circles on there, and there's also small circles. The big circles will try to give you some kind of big buff. So it might be like, for example, I had one that was Your sniper rifles do 20% more damage. Alright, that's reasonable. And you have a higher chance of finding sniper rifles in the overworld. Alright, cool. That's actually kind of cool. A lot of the other stuff was like, here's 5% more damage. And you have to get like 4 of these when we get to the next big orb and stuff. And quite frankly, the skill trees are boring as hell. There's nothing interesting in there except for maybe like 1 or 2 abilities and like the final bubbles at the end. And that goes for all the classes. Having read a lot of it, it's not that interesting. And I know that 8% here, 9% there, 10% here is all well and good in a game that's building towards that end game or like specific builds. But that isn't for me. Like, I don't play these kind of games to have boring skill trees, right? I want it so that I've got interesting stuff to look forward to throughout the entirety of the tree. Whether that's like every time I score a critical hit, I don't know, like an explosion happens, and that kind of happens with the mods, and the mods fill in for like how much more interesting they can be. Like, some of the mods are amazing. Now you get one which drops like a meteor on someone when you score a crit and things like that. But like, to me, I'm like, why isn't there anything interesting in these skill trees? It's literally just percentages. Now, for a game that might be having some kind of end game or raids or even a competitive side, that might be like, you know, those percentages might be good. But for a single player game, that's not interesting to me at all. And I'm just like, I couldn't give a crap about these skill trees. I'm just putting points in. Like, there was no choice for me. It was just like, yeah, that'll do. Like, I wasn't sitting there going, you know, actually I should get this skill because this will benefit this. No, none of that. And that is one of the worst things you can possibly do in a game like this, is just have a terrible, terrible skill tree that does nothing for you. Like, there's not even like a visible thing that you see that happens and changes. There's nothing there. You're like, okay, cool. Like, at least there's no, to my knowledge, in the Techromancer one, there was nothing that sped up my reload speed or something, which would have been something that I would have gone for. Because I'm like, oh yeah, great, I can fire more, you know. But yeah, that was one of the biggest problems. I know that's kind of more of a subjective thing, but yeah, not great. One thing that did plague us, unfortunately, was connection issues, and this is a game that does not have a big player base anymore. I think a lot of people have fallen off, even though they did put that big update out last year or beginning of this year. And yeah, quite frankly, it didn't affect me so much. I didn't drop at all. The biggest problem was playing a sniper when you're trying to shoot stuff and the monsters are lagging out. Like, I'd be shooting a monster, and it'd be running towards me, it would run past me, or like just like it was ignoring me, and then it would walk back into the middle and things like that. This happens so much, and the game, even in there was one massive arena near the end of the game, and the game just can't handle it. Like, it was laggy as hell, it was like unplayable, and that towards the end of the game, on top of things being a bit more bullet spongy, which I'll get onto in a minute, the game just comes to a horrible grind and like overhalting, and it's just not fun. Like, really getting to the end of the story, the main story, was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I wasn't having fun for a good chunk of it. Like, up until that point, I was genuinely having fun because I was doing it with the other guys. Even if the game's not perfect, I was like, oh, I'm having fun with this. At points, I was like, I don't want to play this. This is just, this connection thing is just not working. So that was a major issue. We're talking about bullet spongy enemies. Unfortunately, once you hit World 15, if you don't have, like, builds, essentially, you are going to smash your head against the wall. We hit areas where you'd hit like 5 like elites, I think they're called, and it'd be like guys with shotguns and like whatever, and like, oh my god, you'd be unloading like 500 bullets into one enemy. Like, that, at that point, it's like, why? Like, I know it's meant to scale with the amount of players and the world tier, but like, you shouldn't be punished for that. On top of that, you know, you're taking 1 or 2 shots to almost get downed, and that's a problem when you're trying to basically artificially extend your game by just making bullet spongy enemies. Like, again, not fun. Terrible idea. They need to go back and redo it. But yes, make the enemies hit hard. That's absolutely fine. You know, make them have some health. But like, if they've got silly amounts of health, you know, I'm hitting for like 60k crit damage, and I'm not hardly touching them. I was like, oh dear, this is like my worst nightmare with looter shooters. It's like, they don't know how to make it harder. Instead, they just make everything bullet spongy, and it's like, no, we don't want that. This game also has very middling bosses. There's a couple of boss fights in this game that are actually fun. Halfway through the game, you fight a guy, you run up a bunker. My favourite part of the game, you storm the hill, you're shooting, running on through like World War I trenches almost, and you fight this boss on top of the hill, really fun. And then there's a big spidery boss, and every other boss in the game is forgettable. Those are the only 2 bosses in the entire game that are actually like memorable and fun. The final boss is just a joke. Like, it's not even, and I say this like, you know, not to completely like shit on the game, but I say this and not even as a joke, right? I recently played and finished Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The boss fights in that game, especially the final one, way more interesting, probably more difficult than the final boss in Outriders. Like, and actually has personality, unlike the boss in this. And then this one character that they make a big deal about doesn't come back until you fight him in some expedition late game raid thing. I'm just like, oh my god, you like why? Like, why wasn't this guy the final boss? And that was a really big problem. Which brings on to the story, and the story isn't a bad story, it's just told really badly. So, trying to get through this game, I didn't care. I hardly talked to anybody, I didn't care about what people had to say. Like, there were some funny one-liners from your character, who's basically an asshole the entire time. Like, he's not likable that much. And on top of this, everything feels generic as fuck. And this is the problem with this game, is that, like, apart from the legendary guns, everything's generic. It's meant to be, like, I guess realistic-ish. There's some nice colours, and the game's it's not a bad looker, but like it's just human people and like some other humans and like fighting some aliens, and there are parts of the game that don't feel as generic. 90% of this game is generic as hell, and it's just not interesting. Like, they would have been better off maybe going for maybe a slight like cartoony art style, or just something more vibrant colours. I don't know. But it is one of the most generic games I've played in a very long time. And this brings me to my final thoughts really on Outriders. And I have to agree with what Jack was saying. He was like, there's a good foundation here. And he's right, there is a good foundation to this game. But I cannot recommend this game to anybody. Like, that end game content, that like last couple of hours of the game are just awful. So, like, it might start off quite well, but it just becomes such a slog and not interesting and not fun to do. And quite frankly, I was just like, I'm done. Like, we finished it now, we're going to be moving on to other stuff, and I don't think I'm going to even come back to this when the expansion comes out unless they fix some of the core issues with this game. Maybe when they've done that, I'd have a better feeling on it. Right now, right? Again, I don't like to put scores on games because I think they're pointless. This is absolutely the most middle-of-the-road game. This is a 5 out of 10 kind of game, right? Don't even waste your time over it. I played it on Game Pass, and quite frankly, unless you're going to play through this once with friends, do it. Don't play it on World 15. Like, drop it down a couple, maybe like 13 or 14, or even 12 or 13. And just have a fun playing through it. Find the difficulty, do some of the expeditions at the end, and even though they get ridiculously bullet spongy, and just have fun with it and move on. Like, this game is not worth the price. Like, I think it's like £20 or £30. It's like, it's just not worth it. The game's laggy as fuck. And, like, honestly, it's disappointing to come away from it because, like, again, I started off by having fun, but yeah, just marred down by issues. And once you get to a point where you're smashing your head against the wall and every combat encounter takes like 15 minutes, and you feel like you're not doing, like, I literally, compared to the other two, I felt like I wasn't doing anything in the fights apart from, you know, taking damage and like plinking away like a couple of 100 health or whatever. It just became a grind and just not fun, and you don't want that in a single player game. That's how you turn people off. Single player co-op game, sorry, but that's how you turn your player base off. So yeah, honestly, don't waste your time on this game. It's a shame. I do hope that People Can Fly will make go on to make a sequel, or even with this expansion, go on to really improve the game, and I hope they do that. But I think I'm done. I think I'm done with this because, you know, it's now their job to convince me to come back. Right now, I don't want to put any more time or hours into this. So yeah, so there you go. There's my thoughts on Outriders. I finally played it, completed it, and yeah, just not a fun experience at the end of the day. So that's unfortunate. But thank you very much for watching this video as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.